the coaching and consulting world, everyone talks about success, but few talk about what it really takes to get there. I'm Shantina Holly, and this is Coaches Unplugged, where we pull back the curtain and have honest conversations with the people shaping the industry. In each episode, you'll hear how top coaches and consultants built their businesses, faced their challenges, and continue to grow both in impact and in mindset. No fluff, no pretense, just real stories, real lessons, and real talk about what it takes to build something that lasts. For our Coaches Unplugged listeners, today's guest is someone you'll really resonate with because her work sits at the intersection of leadership, growth, and purpose. I'm excited to welcome Anna Frazzetto. Anna is the founder and the CEO of AFM Strategic Partners, where she helps leaders and sales teams scale intentionally, diversify revenue, and grow without losing their values or their people. She brings decades of experience across staffing, consulting, and digital transformation. Her impact spans global sales strategies, STEM workforce development, and mission critical technology delivery. And what makes her story especially powerful is that she's lived transformation firsthand, has scaled a business from $3 million to $100 million, served as a global chief revenue officer, and has led full-scale sales transformation in complex environments. She's also a dedicated advocate for women in leadership in tech, mentoring rising professionals and shaping conversations on inclusion through ARA, ASA, and the University of Richmond. A 7-time honoree on SIA's Global Power 150 Women in Staffing and a top 50 DEI influencer, brings resilience shaped by her journey as a cancer survivor and channels it into meaningful, people-centered change. I am honored to welcome Anna Frazzetto to Coaches Unplugged. Welcome, Anna.
Oh my goodness, Shantina. First of all, I think I'm exhausted from hearing the list that you just shared. And we could take it easy on the word decades because I keep getting scared as to how many decades I've actually been in this business. But such a pleasure to be here today.
Yes. And let's start the conversation. Tell us about your journey and how you got started and where you are today.
So it's kind of a funny story because I started off. So I'm a child of immigrant parents. So English was actually my third language, right? I learned how to speak Italian and Sicilian first. So I struggled at school academically when I was in grade school because I was translating everything into my native language, right? So English was a difficult language to pick up, but math was always something, it's the universal language. I
Mhm.
could get really comfortable with it and I excelled at it. So I followed the STEM curriculum and I became a computer science and mathematics degree holder and went into development. So I was a programmer and developer for years and always stayed on the technical side. And it wasn't until a mentor who was the leader of this organization who said, Anna, you have such a knack of explaining things. We're struggling with our product. The salespeople don't understand it technically enough. Can you go out with the salespeople to kind of pitch what our product really does? And I love that. I love the client
Mhm.
interaction. And that was kind of, I had a little bit of taste of that, that, that sweetness that I was going after as far as my job. And so I slowly joined the dark side, as my friends in tech tell me. I started to get into sales, which I enjoyed. So I kind of, kept my foot in doing sales technical support and then carrying my own book of business. And that led to the career that I have today, where I've been president of business units. I've run sales organizations globally and have always carried my own book of business for the last 20 years.
Mm.
So that's kind of a little bit of background as far as how I got to where I am today, as far as owning my own company.
Yes. And your company, AFM Strategic Partners, tell us a little bit about your role and how it fits into the bigger picture at
Sure. So what's interesting, so I'm the CEO and founder of the company. And what happened was probably about 2 years ago, I had been wanting to start my own company for quite some time. And there was always something, there was always that perfect job where I'm like, okay, I can't pass it up. I'm going to take this full time job and wound up doing it. And then finally, I kind of reached a point in my life where it made sense to say, just do it. Just do what you really want to do, which was to start my own company. And what led me to it is the gap that I saw in the industry. So I was a global chief revenue officer at Air Swift for quite some time. And prior to that, I was at Hari Nash and Tenchel. And the one gap that I noticed is that how sales training and sales coaching and mentoring was done in organizations was kind of missing the mark from my perspective, in the sense that it was well structured. It was fantastic. But salespeople, as a salesperson, I know I only absorb information in nuggets. So therefore, I felt like the sales playbook and really coaching and mentoring salespeople was somewhat missing. And it's what I love the most to do. So that's how I formed the company, basically on three initiatives. One was stagnant growth in a company, because if you think about it, in post COVID, a lot of companies were struggling with, and even during COVID, on how to approach sales in a whole new world. And that
Mhm.
was something that I felt that I came up with a creative approach on how to be able to handle that. And then also, how do you learn to pivot and not beat your head up against the wall and keep doing the same thing over and over again? So this just means you have to do more cold calls, or this just means you have to do more campaigns, as opposed to really hitting the pause button, which is a common phrase that I use over and over again, and really looking at, okay, what is really not working in this company? So that's
Yeah.
the advice that I provide, is doing that. And then if a company is looking to diversify their portfolio of services, where they want to get into other product offerings, which a lot of times during tough economic times makes sense, because it gives you a chance to pivot in a different direction.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking on the topic of being able to pivot in business and looking different for businesses as the onset of COVID, what do you think are like some of the top changes that you've seen happen in the industry over the course of like 10 years? It's been such dramatic change, but what do you think are the biggest changes that you've observed?
So I think the interesting part, which I love lately, I have been obsessed with this, is looking at the workforce. And you have now baby boomers that are still employed. You have your millennials, you have Gen X, Gen Y, and Gen Zers, right? So you
Hmm.
have a plethora of generations, and they're all different. The
Hmm.
buyer education has evolved over the last 10 years. So COVID kind of taught us a little bit. You know how you walk into a person's office and try to establish a little bit of idle chit chat? You notice something in their office, either a picture of a golfer or children or a dog, and you try to establish that personal connection with the person. Well, now you move into a world where everything is via Zoom calls or
Yep.
Microsoft Teams or Google Hangout, whatever you utilize. And it's hard. The
Yeah.
call starts right off the get-go with, "Okay, why are we on the phone? What are
Yep.
we talking about?" So that personal connection goes away, and for salespeople, that is detrimental in trying to figure out, how do you establish that connection? So I think that's changed, is the whole buyer and the buyer's buying signals. Buyers are also more educated. There's more data available outside, and therefore, by the time you walk in the door, they already know what they want and don't want.
Yep.
So it's not a matter of showing up. And I use this in training a lot: show up and throw up, right? You show up and you tell them about all the fabulous things your company does, and the client's already written you off, because it's like, no, this is not what I'm looking for. So I think that's changed. The overall management and
Yeah.
leadership has changed, because if you think about it, how I managed my sales team 10 years ago versus today are completely different. I
Hmm.
think the one thing that I'm grateful for is the fact of having emotional intelligence at
Hmm.
work and understanding how our salespeople wired. I'm talking specifically about sales, but honestly, this applies across all functions.
Yeah.
And being that leader that wants to know, how are you doing? What's going on? And genuinely ask the question and not focus on just numbers. I call it bits and bytes. And therefore, if a person is doing great, they might respond well to that. But if a person is kind of on a slippery slope, you're going to lose them, right? So
Yeah.
you want to make sure that you understand their mental state, right? Their work state and what are their struggles. You as a leader need to figure out, how do I remove those obstacles from that person's life so that they can
Hmm.
be more successful. I think that's changed also in the last 10 years. That was not the mentality 10 years ago.
Yeah. And speaking of all the different changes, and you so eloquently put, the ones that are maybe people don't even notice has changed or transformed. But to your point, like a lot has changed, especially with interpersonal communication and establishing rapport with people and actually just finding out and getting ways to know them. How has that impacted the way you work? And what does a typical day look like for you in this kind of working environment?
Right. So I feel like I'm focused on relationships.
Hmm.
Right? And that's the lesson that I teach all of the salespeople that I work with and the leaders that I work with, the sales leaders and even CEOs within companies, is get the relationship and having that level of establishing yourself as a trusted advisor to the client or to the now, if you notice, I'll say client even if a person is a prospect. It's just part of the way I'm wired because
Hmm.
I feel that eventually I'm going to turn those prospects into clients. So
Hmm.
everybody's a client. But so what I want to do is I want to be able to show them that I'm credible in what I do for a living and that I'm really interested in them
Hmm.
and what their pain points are. I'll also be the first one to say, if it's a service offering that I cannot offer, I am honest up front saying, this is not really an AFM strategic partner sweet spot, but let me help you because I do know a handful of other people that are in this space.
Hmm.
Now, yes, I might have lost the opportunity, but what'll happen is it comes back tenfold because
Hmm.
that client is going to remember the fact that you're trustworthy, you're credible, you truly are that trusted advisor, as I was saying. You've established that relationship. And as soon as an opportunity comes up that's in line with your company, they're going to come to you. So my day focuses on, how do I build relationships? Who else is out there that I want to establish a relationship with? And I do it in a subtle way. I don't do it in them in me trying to pitch AFM strategic partners, but more in me understanding more about them.
Yeah. That's a very important part that I feel a lot of businesses miss the mark on building that relationship piece and immediately going into this is what I can do and this is what I can offer and these are all the reasons why I'm great and why you should partner with me. And I think you pretty much alluded to it in the beginning that our buyers are more educated today. I think there was a survey that said with B2B, buyers interact with 3 to 5 pieces of content before they're even showing up or, expressing interest in you. So they already have their preconceived notions before they even come into the door about what you can offer them.
Well, exactly. And actually, I have an interesting stat for you. In my last company, we actually measured that 75% of clients that come to you have already pre selected in their heads who is going to be the vendor of choice, especially if you're going through an RFP process. So,
Hmm.
therefore, you need to question yourself, where were you in the sales process? And how well do you have a relationship with them to be
Yeah.
that company that they
The
want to work
choice.
with,
Yeah.
right? You don't wanna be
Yeah.
the 11th hour vendor submitting a submission to an RFP.
Yeah. In your experience, I know you touched on building relationships and understanding or establishing that relationship in not so in subtle ways, in ways that put humans first. What advice would you give to a business whose organization is primarily on online platforms and are trying to build up their book of business. They're trying to build their network. And you talked about different generations working together and them all having different styles. What I'm seeing is a lot of millennials and really like Gen Zers and Gen Y, the interpersonal communication is not their strong suit. So, as you are trying to overcome those challenges, especially as a young professional or a young business owner, how do you overcome those challenges to overcome or to continue to make yourself build relationships in ways that is not comfortable for you?
Right. So I'm going to answer this two ways because I want to go back to a point that you made early on in the question. I think a lot of times what happens is organizations get very impatient and put pressure. So it becomes a catch-22 situation. You notice that your revenues are going down and therefore you tighten the screws on the salespeople saying you got to generate, more volume to build the top of the funnel.
Hmm.
And then that means salespeople kind of lose that personal touch and it becomes a numbers game. But then what happens is you actually have an adverse reaction. So one of the advice that I give organizations is how do you instill patience to maintain your current business, but then also how do you instill patience to be able to build net new business? The other aspect of that is I focus on companies looking on further landing and expanding in existing businesses, which is often something that's overlooked because they're chasing the new logos. So that's one aspect. Now, the
Hmm.
generational component, one of my favorites, and like I said, I've been obsessed with it lately because, I love educating salespeople on, you know, you can't text a baby boomer and
Hmm.
think that they're gonna, first of all, that their phone is even gonna be on them,
Hmm.
and second of all, that they would check text if you're trying to get in front of them. You need to understand your audience. So it's all about understand your audience and who's receiving the information. Don't take for granted that people want to receive the communication like you want to receive the
Yeah.
communication. I think that this will also help the intergenerational component that companies deal with. One of the common themes that I see is companies getting frustrated with Gen Zers and saying there's no loyalty and they
Mm.
quit at the drop of a hat and they're like a difficult, entitled generation. They're difficult to
Hmm.
manage. I couldn't disagree more. I
Hmm.
actually think there's so much we can learn from Gen Zers because I feel their look is a fresh new look and how to look at business, how to sell in this business. They're also more direct. They will
Yeah.
not tolerate incompetence. They will not tolerate, a manager just saying, well, we do it this way because we do it this way. No,
Hmm.
they are more realistic in understanding what the process is and how to do it. And if they don't like it, they pick up and leave, which I wish, if you think about it, I'm not sure I would have had that courage early on in my
Yeah.
career if I didn't like something to pick up and leave. I think I was just grin and bear it
Yeah.
because that's the way I was taught. So that's what I would do is I work with the different generations and help them understand who's receiving the information. How do you communicate with them? And it's a little bit like the movie Lost in Translation.
Hmm.
You want to make sure that what you're communicating is being received correctly and that people are not focusing in how somebody says something versus what they're saying. Right.
Yeah.
So there's a subtle difference there. But I think those are some of the key elements that I would suggest.
Yeah, that's so true. It reminded me when you said people have to understand, there could be a loss in translation in how someone says it versus what they truly mean. Like that is a lesson that you can take over all aspects of your life. I'm thinking about my conversations with my husband sometimes. Like, sometimes he says things and I'm like, I know you mean well, but I didn't like the way you said it. So, I'm not ready to receive it yet. And I
Right,
think
but that's a whole other podcast that we
that's
could talk about. Yes, there's a whole education process that we would have to go through, and you talk about lost in translation, but I'm right with you on that point.
and it's a across this new way of, and I guess you can't say new, but modern way of how we just interact with each other in the world. So you can put something on social media now in your LinkedIn and have a website and it's telling this whole story about you, and people can perceive you a certain way before ever showing up or actually meeting you. They've already met you digitally, and there can be so much to defining how they see you, and you're not able to control the narrative of how you're perceived. And it's something that I think in an industry like coaching, consulting, and training is the key theme I hear around guests all the time is you have to really define what your value props are online first. You have to, like, it's such a people focused industry, but because of the way that the world is now, you kind of have to lean into the digital presence to make a pathway to the actual meeting of, you and so you can actually put a voice to who you are.
Right. So I love this because you hit on a couple of things that I get super excited about. If you think about it, that's what Gen Zers do a great job. They
Yeah.
understand the digital footprint of a client before they actually talk to them, as opposed to a baby boomer might not be thinking about that
Yeah.
unless told to do so.
Yeah.
Or they might look at it, but just really skim the surface as what data is available.
Yeah.
The importance of your digital footprint also, that's my advice to younger generations, is keep in mind that whatever you post out there stays forever. So
Mhm.
regardless if you take it down or don't take it down,
Yep.
whatever the case is it becomes you. So be
Technology.
aware, think
Yep.
twice before
Yep.
you want to make a statement on something, or you want to post different, the pictures and stuff, because I know as part of the hiring process in pretty much all the companies that I worked at, you look at the digital footprint of the individual that's coming on board, and will they represent your company in the proper way? So that's just, one comment in regards to that. But there's a valuable lesson in how do you learn to understand about the person when you walk in the door. How powerful is that when you sit for the first meeting, that you can
Mhm.
actually say, well, so I noticed you spoke at this event last month, and I can see that you belong to these organizations. Actually, we have this organization that we sponsor. So, and all of a sudden the conversation is different, as
Yeah.
opposed to, hi, let me tell you a little bit about AFM strategic partners. That
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
just doesn't work.
Yeah, that's so true. I have a little bit of a different question shifting the topic here. So we talk to coaches, consultants, and trainers. And all of our guests we have asked, what does that mean to you? I know there might be a misconception that those three titles offer similar things, but in talking to different guests who work across many different sectors, whether it be C-suite, leadership, one-on-one coaching, team coaching, consulting. A two-part question. What does AFM Strategic Partners specialize in those brackets? And then what do you think differentiates the three lanes in this industry?
Oh, so that's a great question, because when you look at training, training is that you've put together material. It's I don't want to say canned material, but it's a
Hmm.
set of material. It's not necessarily personalized for the group who's going to be receiving it. And you can conduct a training class, or you can also produce different modules that you can send to the team that they can do online training, and then they get graded on it.
Hmm.
It's effective because you're getting some foundational information out there for other people, but it's a little bit different as far as your own involvement. Now, you might be providing some advice. If I do, like, for example, at AFM, we'll have like in classroom training, and I will share different, I would handle it this way. I would do it this way. Have you thought about this?
Hmm.
So there is that interactive component. When you flip it to coaching, coaching is more strategic and more individualized. And where now I really get into the weeds of understanding how this person operates. I'll give you an
Hmm.
example. I just received an email today, actually, which warmed my heart, where a sales leader that I had been coaching told me about a different individual who was, when I joined the company on a consulting basis,
Hmm.
was struggling. There was actually some discussion about possibly not going to be a fit, but I saw the diamond in the rough as I
Hmm.
started working with this person. And it was a matter of building up the individual's confidence. Because what happens is a lot of companies apply pressure, the numbers aren't there. Then you
Yeah.
get even more insecure on your messaging and what you're saying. So to your point earlier, That's a big valuable lesson that I work with organizations on. ICPs and USPs, right? Unique selling
Mhm.
points and who's your ideal, client profile. You need to know those before you actually go out there. But I worked with this person. I worked with this person and I get a message today saying he is hitting it out of the park. He is a shining star. He's had one win after another. There's no stopping him. And thank you so much for all the coaching and mentoring that I had given to this one individual. So that's what I love to do. That's what
Mhm.
AFM Strategic Partners is all about. I also think there's a subtle difference between mentoring and coaching. Coaching, you try to provide answers and
Mhm.
suggestions on how to approach things. Mentoring is more of a listening skill and a little bit more of tell me how you would approach it and not so much giving up an answer. Now,
Yeah.
I like mixing both because I don't think there's value in always giving an answer. You want it's what's the expression? Teach a person how to fish, they can fish for life. But if you keep catching the fish for them, that's it. They're dependent on you forever. So that's what I try to do in my coaching session. And the consulting part, that's the umbrella, right? If you think about any advice and any of the groups that you work with, you're providing a consulting service that allows them to be able to better their process, their tools, their people, right? It kind of covers everything.
Yeah. And one question that I like to ask folks in this industry, because as we said over and over, this is a people first industry. So when you have those success stories of someone who's doing great and you can see the results paying off and what you've been helping them with or coaching them with. So, two-part question. How do you measure success when you are offering up ideas, you're offering up your thought process, and it's not always a tangible product or a tangible KPI, but how do you measure success and how do you give advice to coaches who are trying to find a way to show their value in a
Right.
tangible way?
Yeah, I always look at pipeline activity, right? So now dig a little bit deeper. The validity of the pipeline activity, right? Because I look, coming from sales, ground zero, we can get really cute where we say we have activity, but the activity is not going to turn into actual,
Mhm.
revenue because you're trying to get your management off your back kind of thing. I'm not saying I ever did that, but I'm just saying I know that that
It
happens.
happens. Yeah.
Absolutely, it happens. So I always look at the validity and the pipeline itself. How effectively is the person adding more to the top of the funnel? And then I look at the conversion rate. So I look at as you're entering the funnel, how are you converting from each phase of the sales process? So I've worked with some organizations where, somebody shows up and they have $3 million in their pipeline of activity, but the reality is maybe 5% would turn into real business because as I dig deeper
Mhm.
and find out about the projects, they're not real. It's not happening.
Mhm.
There's a lot of wishing and hoping going on. So that's the advice that I would give. I think that's the key metric for me that
Mhm.
I work with companies on. Also, is the quickest way that I can show results to an
Yeah.
organization because if I could show them their conversion rate increasing, and if I could show that their pipeline validity has increased, that's going to turn into revenue. It's just a matter
Mhm.
of time. So I think those are a couple of great tools that you can utilize.
Yeah. What would you say are your biggest opportunities for improvement with AFM strategic partners? I know you talked a lot about your value props and your coaching, training, and sales, and but what do you think is the biggest opportunity for improvement in this day and age for your company?
So one of the things that I'm kind of focused on, it actually led me to write a book about it because what happened was when I first started the company, I was thinking of how do I produce like little golden nuggets that salespeople can look at on a daily basis. So what I did was I started producing sales tip of the day and I
Mm-hmm.
posted it on LinkedIn every day and I had 100 sales tips. And then eventually people were responding and I was getting feedback. And I had a person come to me and say, do you have this documented anywhere?
Mm-hmm.
Because this would be valuable. So that's what led me to writing a book,
Mm-hmm.
which is going to come out in March, that I take the sales tips. I organize them into different sections. So as a sales leader, you now have these little golden nuggets that you can use to work with your sales team. So I feel like the traditional methodology and sales book and all that stuff that you have, yes, you can go through that with the salespeople, but how do you keep it evergreen? And I
Mhm.
find that this is the
Mhm.
secret sauce to keep it evergreen. So I would think, as far as AFM strategic partners, I like to invest more time on the launch of the book and getting that out there. And I think that's going to be really beneficial to the industry as a whole.
Nice. And speaking of that, what's next for you and your business? Where do you see yourself going in the next 6 months from now, 12 months from now? What are your goals?
Oh my goodness, Shantina, we don't have enough time. We don't have enough time. So I want to keep doing what I'm doing.
Mhm.
I feel like I have a podcast, so I'm revamping the podcast. I've done 3 seasons of that. So I have new ideas. I'm doing a lot more of these like mini series in regards to specific topics, and that's Past the Pitch podcast. It's on YouTube. I wrote another book that still hasn't gone to publishing that is about leadership. But what I do is I personalize it to the lessons that I learned from my father. I had mentioned to you earlier before we got started, I'm a product of immigrant parents, and they migrated to this country a long, long time ago, and a hardship story. They actually lost their first child that they came to this country with. My mother wanted to go back, but didn't. And then my father had that intestinal fortitude to stick it out. And so it was amazing to me because we my sister and I are in this country because of them and the sacrifices that they made. So I have a book that it talks about the leadership lessons that I have learned and how it relates to my heritage, but the importance that we can learn from the generations before us and
Mhm.
how they managed crisis and how they managed difficult times. And there's so much that we can learn that we've taken for granted that I'm hoping to bring more attention to it. So those are just to name a few things that are going on at AFM.
Those are all exciting things, and we'll be staying tuned for your release of your new book and tuning into your podcast and sharing with our followers. Just to switch the conversation a little bit, talking about change in the industry, there's this huge question. You mentioned at the beginning that you have a programming background. I'm very curious on your take on AI and specifically for this industry. A lot of people are feeling like that AI may be something that replaces them. I've heard from guests a trend that there are many prospective clients who are now saying, well, I don't need a coach because I can use AI. What is your take and your reaction to AI in this industry?
So that's like the $1,000,000 question, right? Because if you think about it, I've seen a lot of change. You mentioned about digital transformation. I've seen a lot of change in the industry over the last 2.5 decades. And the one thing is we don't seem to learn on how to grasp a new evolution in our industry, right? So
Mm,
if I could go back, I had a boss that told me the story about when ATMs were invented, that the chairman of the board for one of the mega banking companies said, it'll never work. You'll never have it's going to get rid of bank tellers. It's going to be horrendous. Meanwhile, let's fast forward to 2026 and ATMs are at every street corner and there's a bank at every street corner, right? So
mhm,
there was no influence. The same thing with the adoption of automation
mhm,
or digitizing of manual workload and having, oh, it's going to get rid of jobs. What winds up happening is there's retooling that takes place,
yeah,
right? People need to learn to pivot and accept the change. There
yeah,
will be a reshuffling in skill sets, but you can't be a COBOL programmer. So this goes back to my programming days, right? I had joined the industry well after COBOL, but then the millennium happened and COBOL became a needed programming language because everybody was worried about Y2K. And
mhm,
what was interesting about that is that you still had those old COBOL programmers that were just hanging strong and not wanting to retool themselves to learn new languages, which was a big mistake. I
Yeah.
never bothered to learn COBOL because it made no sense and just wanted to always be progressive and learn whatever the current languages were. So I learned, Pascal, I learned C sharp, I learned C++, right? I just kept assembler. I tried to learn and stay current, and it was a constant evolving transition that you went through. And I think that's what has to happen with AI. Will there be job replacements? Of course there will be, but there needs to
Yeah.
be reskilling and retooling of people so that you can figure out how do you use AI. Now, AI is not replacing human functionality,
Yeah.
right? So AI is, you got to almost look at AI as the personal assistant that makes you more effective,
Hmm.
right? That you can get more things done with less bandwidth. So, for
Hmm.
example, in the medical field, tremendous enhancements with early detection because AI can see things that the human eye cannot see. So,
Hmm.
therefore, performing surgeries using robotics and
Yep.
AI, which has 100% accuracy versus human
Right.
accuracy. So you use it as the tool that it's meant to be is my answer. Let go of the panic, right? Like we're
Yeah.
done with the panic. You have to figure out how do you adopt and adapt. What
Yeah.
tools make sense for your company? Now, there are organizations out there that actually help you because there is such a plethora of tools out there that it becomes overwhelming to figure out what product should I look at? And
Right.
everybody claims that they're the best in the industry. So I do question and also ask to proceed with caution when you're trying to figure out what tools and make sure that you're doing the proper vetting and screening and qualifications.
Yeah. I like that you said adopt and adapt because I think to your point, AI is not shouldn't be a tool that replaces human function, but work alongside and help us to enhance the skills that we already have. And you mentioned some ways in other industries that it's working. I know the NFL, I think, is using AI for concussion protocol and being able, things like that. Like though, that's groundbreaking. That's great that we have those enhancements to work alongside the experts in the room. In the specific coaching industry, I've talked again to many guests who have said that they have leveraged AI to help in different aspects of their businesses, whether it be lead generation or content creation or reducing busy work. Like you said, maybe it can be like an assistant, a personal assistant. What ways do you think, or what area of AFM strategic partners do you feel needs the most enhancement right now? And there might be like a blockage or an opportunity that you can use other technology to help you overcome the hurdle or the bottleneck, as they call it.
Right, right. Well, I feel really fortunate because coming from a tech background, I think I'm an early adapter
Out
as
there.
far as making sure that, and also if you think about it, my company is fairly young, so it's a great way for me to be able to do more with less.
Hmm.
So I'm a big fan of utilizing the tools that are out there. But I'll tell you one recommendation that I make to clients is you can use, I've done this only with ChatGPT, but you can use the voice component and set up what I call like role practicing. So,
Hmm.
you know how people say typically role playing? And I
Yeah.
always feel like we're not playing. This is our trade. We're
Uh-huh.
practicing. So, right, so it's role practicing. But you can set it up with ChatGPT where I would give the scenario saying, okay, I'm client A. I have these needs. You're going to be difficult with me. And I want you to ask me these questions. And then I have the salesperson try to do the opening conversation with the client. And then at the end, you ask it, tell me, what did I do well? What should I improve? What
Yep.
other questions should I ask? So that talk about the time that that saves because now I could have teams doing this while I'm not physically there,
Yeah.
right? I'm not on a
Right.
call with them. And then they would come back and give me the results. And then we would work through it and figure out, okay, well, I kind of agree with this part. I don't agree with this part. Let's try this and then work through it. So, but you start, instead of starting at ground zero, I feel now you can start at like ground 10 because
Yeah.
you've done this initial legwork already with using tools like ChatGPT.
Yeah. Nice. And I'm looking at the time. I can't believe we're already coming up to the end of our conversation. two final questions for you, Anna, and it's been so great to hear your insights. This is a very ambiguous question, and I want you to answer it off the cuff. If you had a magic wand, what would you change either in your business or the industry?
Oh my goodness. I would say kindness for the industry. I think certain trends and certain things that are happening in our world today have led us to forget that human element like we were talking about with AI. And it's to approach conversations and approach business and approach outlooks, just approach your employees with that level of kindness first is what I would
Mhm.
love to sprinkle the world with today.
Man, tell me about it. And, it sounds cliche, but it's so important that we have people who just generally try to pay it forward and help others and look out for one another. And it would just alleviate so much confusion that's going on. So I appreciate that answer. And the last and final question I have for you is, what advice would you give to new or incoming coaches who are looking to transition into this field, or those who are just starting out as an entrepreneur?
I would say be focused and stay focused. And what I mean by that is that often when you start out, you get bombarded with lots of different things that you could possibly do. And then you might have started your company saying, I'm going to provide ABC. But then as you get out there in the field, you start noticing, oh, there's a little bit of D, a little bit of E, a little bit of F. Oh, I'll try that. I'll try that. But then you're losing focus on what your company mission is. So that's why I say is, be focused on strategically what you want to do, but then stay focused, which is hard to
Mm-hmm.
not want to deviate, especially if you think you should be doing something else. Now, you could have a pivot change, but I'm just saying, like, stay true to what you really wanna do.
Yeah, yeah. I think there was someone who said before, like, if you try to be good at everything, you're not gonna be good at anything. Like, you have to focus on the thing that you're good at and continue to build on that. And then, like you said, if
Exactly.
it requires some pivot in the process, fine. But focus on that one niche or that one area first. So I love that. Um, Anna, where can our listeners connect with you and keep up with your latest insights?
Fantastic. So LinkedIn is probably the
Okay.
best way. So it's Anna Frazzetto at LinkedIn. And the other way is through my website, www.annafrazzetto, I'm sorry, annastrategicpartners.com. And last but not least, stay tuned for my sales leadership in action book that's coming out in March. I'll have more on my website in regards to that as far as how you can get it.
Yes, you heard it here first. Make sure you look out for her new book that is coming out. I would like to thank you, Anna, for taking the time to speak with us today. We want to thank you for listening and for being a part of the conversation that's redefining what it means to grow, lead, and create impact. If today's episode resonated, we want you to share it, we want you to follow, and we want you to keep the energy moving forward, because the future of coaching and consulting isn't written by chance, it's written by those willing to evolve. Don't forget, you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts or stream us on YouTube. I'm Shantina Holly, and until next time, keep building something extraordinary.